I don't remember what episode this number is, guys.
164.
164. This Life in Tech, episode 164, saved by TK. I am Jason.
Still the bad guy, but I'm not in New York. I'm at an undisclosed safe location because you got to keep the brain power alive through all this.
I was still TK.
Oof. What's going on, guys?
Everything's
I don't know what to say. I would have gotten out of
derail the show. I can either derail the show at the 3-second mark or at the 37-minute mark. I am flexible. I can do it at any time. Just, pick your spot.
For the audience's knowledge, and I didn't think it used to be pre-planned, but it totally is. We have like 15 minutes before the show starts where we try to get all the stupid shit out of the way and try to move this to no avail.
Yeah, no.
I actually think we just speed the engine up.
Yeah, no. Totally.
I'm like Michael Jordan. You just cannot contain me.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I always think that. Yeah, Dan Ford, Michael, the exact same guy.
Yeah,
we're like the same thing. It's like the same thing.
I'll tell you this though, man. To your point, I've had like this abject nostalgia for California the last few weeks, like a couple weeks prior to everything breaking down. And it was non-specific. It was just like little things like, I wish I could go to that restaurant that I always went to. And I haven't felt that way, since I left. And, but the last week and a half, I've definitely been thinking, you know what? I'm glad I don't live amongst all those people anymore. I am perfectly fine out here in the country with nobody really close to me.
We could get all this stuff done if people would just, 2 weeks self-quarantine, but they won't. I mean, I go out and I see tons of people all over the place still.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it. Well,
I think telling people to wear cloth masks or bandanas is silly because there's 3 masks that actually work to keep the virus in, and cloth 4-layer, whatever it is, 18 layers, smother yourself with something isn't on that list, right? And so in the beginning of this, I was getting, it just makes me go crazy. Just the fear mongering, right? That, we start the news off with how many people died.
Right.
We don't start the news off with 98% of people recover easily and things like that, right? And yes, it is. It's bad, right? But you almost to the point now where you have to scare people like this because Americans in particular, I don't know the rest of the world because I don't live there, but Americans in particular, they're not attuned to doing what they're told anymore, right? And or believing. Actually, that's not true. They're not attuned to believing what they're told unless, and especially when it doesn't benefit their near-term I want to be happy mechanism, right? When it says I've got to be inconvenienced. And that's a large part of it, right? I joke around. There's a lot when people as a group, as the human race misbehave, I would say that's why we can't have nice things. That's why the next really smart race from another planet is just going to go right by Earth. They're going to be like, oh boy, let's go. Let's keep looking. Right?
Yeah.
We can't get out of our own way.
No.
There hasn't been an honest discussion about what this is, why it is, and everything like that. When we're down to arguing about whether you can call it a Chinese virus or not, the C in COVID stands for Chinese, right? So just call it COVID-19, right? And I listened to an excellent podcast the other day, longtime medical professional or like that. He's like, the problem is COVID-19 and the coronavirus. Coronavirus is a more overarching topic, and COVID-19 is very specific to what's going on right now. And his point of view was that we're not testing, or I think specifically for COVID-19, we're doing a more broad-based generic look for it, because the problem with it is a lot of people have coronavirus antigens in it. And I always like when people go test for illicit drugs, like they don't test for cocaine, they test for the drugs that process, for the substances that process it.
Yeah.
The drug.
Was this what he was referring to with the rapid test?
Well, it was a more overarching discussion about what the global community is saying about it and how. And it, we're the company that I'm running. We do this is what we do. We do analytics for this. And that chart you saw behind the president earlier this week was based on the Chinese data and using that Chinese data, right? And that data set it's not remotely accurate. It can't be, right? Because the geographical distribution in China is incorrect, and then the contemporary morbidity rate is way out of whack, right? If you're going to say, hey, we want to chart a course of what this is going to look like over time with the tools that we use and balance it against the economy, right? We have the economy and we have public health, right? If we listen to all the doctors, the economy is going to grind to a halt for the foreseeable future. If we listen to all the economists, how many more people are going to die because we stopped worrying about people commingling and all the things that created a larger public health crisis. Give me the Italian data set, right? Because I trust the Italians to give us better fidelity of data. And so in a lot of ways, we've started with a bad data set in how we predict what's going to happen. And then we have people that are like, this will never happen to me. All right? And it might not happen to you. Or you might be a carrier and it'll happen to somebody else. Right? Jason, is the thing, like, you're happy you don't live in a place where you've got to make these broad decisions. Virginia Beach is kind of weird because we do have an urban area, there's a lot of people here, but it's so horizontal that unless you want to engage, like, you have to go to the grocery store, you have to do something else. You're not gonna, like, I mean, we see our neighbors across the fence.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody's respectful of let's try not to kill each other today.
Right.
So when we're going back to the test, it was my understanding, because kind of what you were saying, it's very broad based because they can't get down specific in terms of speed for is it COVID-19, but they know that COVID-19 is a SARS variant.
Right.
Aren't they basically, I mean, my understanding was they're testing for essentially, SARS aspects, and evidently a lot of people still tend to be carrying that around because there's no.
Well, it's not necessarily carrying it around. They've come in contact with it over the years that it's been out, right? And so they've become, it's the wonder of the human body is, hey, I've got just a little bit of this, and your body's like, well, let's go check that out. That looks bad. Let's become resistant to it. And so a lot of people haven't. So it gives a lot of false positives, and that's bad because then it starts detracting from your ability to take care of the people that are truly in need.
Right. Well, and so first of all, let me point out, Dan, that this is why the current models of like intrusion detection being an immune system are fundamentally flawed because they don't include this very point, which is that the at least the mammalian immune system is what's called fragile, meaning it can break. And its strength is based upon its ability to break and then rapidly recover, which is producing antibodies. That's the chief marker of it. And so this is what's so interesting to me about this topic. I've actually become less interested in COVID-19 specifically, but check this out. So on Friday, I was finishing a discrete math probability module, and we started talking about conditional probability into like Bayesian reasoning, which is, making predictions using stats for, uncertain outcomes. And one of the classic examples is some type of drug testing. And because people will say, for instance, this test has a 98% correct detection rate. But in that 2%, and you can go down this of what's a false positive, what's a false negative. And then there's actually bifurcating circumstances where I have it and the test tells me I have it. That's the ideal outcome. Or I have it and the test tells me I don't. That's bad. Or the test tells me I have it when I actually don't have it. That's bad too. And you can start to break this all out. I'm trying to make this really timely and interesting example because fuck, man, if you got to get tested for COVID-19, you might want to understand the probability that you actually have it, right? And that's like my little reptile brain thinking. I start talking about this and everybody's freaking out. And it's no longer about the probability. It's about I'm not going to judge it. All the information that's floating around about what this is and how the tests work. And that's all anybody wants to talk about. in this class.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I just wanted to compute some probabilities. What are you doing?
But it's a larger discussion, right?
Yeah,
There's multiple forces at play, and when you start talking about it on our federal level, it's all politics.
Right.
There's no like it's if the malaria drug, is the one that thing, I'll never get it. Right? I was given so much of that over the course of my lifetime that I'm strain resistant to that forever. Right? If that's actually the case.
Right.
If that's actually the case, and medically we've proven it, then people should start taking it. Right? This is the larger thing.
Please take the actual malaria drug.
Yeah. Don't drink fish tank cleaner. And then reporters blaming the president for people drinking fish tank cleaner. Right? This is the Tide Pod thing. Right? Tide Pod snacks. Right? But this is the larger thing. I mean, when you look at it, and this is health, right? This is obesity. This is I don't want to change my lifestyle. I want a different outcome, right? When people go to the doctor, they want the easy button. They just want a pill, right? And so we've become so accustomed to the pharmaceutical industry having a pill for everything rather than you taking control of your life. And that drives, in my opinion, some very bad behavior with, I want it now, I need it now, I need it now. Well, hey, if we had fidelity of information from the Chinese the day that all of a sudden, if it was accidentally released into the wild, then it would have been a different outcome.
Yeah, sure.
Right? And if we had an intellectually honest discussion about it, right? But getting up on TV and saying, oh, Chinese Americans are going to feel bad. They're not. They know it came from China. Right? Just like most other immigrants, people come here because they want to start a new life, right? Or they want to think. We're not saying that all Chinese people are bad. We're saying that the thing started in China. If we don't talk about the origins of things, how can we get to where they're at today?
Well, and I think it's also, wouldn't you agree based on that it's a lack of talking about general population, a lack of ability to discern what's actually important. It's like trying to solve a word problem in math. Like what actually is valuable to compute the solution to this problem, and what the name of this thing is, I don't understand why it matters to people. What matters is like what? Okay, so
because they can't comprehend the actual aspects of what's going to be really danger to them. So we have been almost as a society conditioned for political correctness, and calling anything what it is. It doesn't matter to that it started. If it started in China, it started in China. I mean, MERS is the Middle Eastern variant for a coronavirus. Who cares that it's in the Middle East? People get so caught up in the political correctness because that's easy for everyone to understand. What's hard is the actual aspects of what we can do to actually change some behavior to get through this without, according to the current stats. I mean, we're talking about 2,644 people dying every day on April 16th till we reach our end state of something like 300,000 right now.
So let me, if I can for a moment, try to tell you something I've been thinking about that overlaps with this, but takes us slightly askew. But it also ties with what we were talking about last week and something you were talking about in the pre-show, TK, with mentoring. So somehow, man, I don't know what I was doing, and I fell into this YouTube hole of watching Tony Robbins videos. Okay, and I'm listening to this guy, and I'm thinking about like this whole self-help genre, which clearly makes money. I mean, there's no denying that. But I started wondering about the personality.
But is it snake oil? Is what Tony Robbins selling you snake oil?
I'm not judging it. My question is slightly different. It's related, but slightly different. Okay.
All right.
I started wondering about what it would be like to be a person in that seminar that's paying $5,000 for 6 days. Okay. And having this experience. And I started to wonder about them as a human being in a place where that's the right answer. That's what they need to become something different. And so then I started wondering about, what is it? Because it's not a small number of people. Because look, there's Tony Robbins, there's Tim Ferriss, there's Deepak Chopra. The list goes on and on and on. And whether they're snake oil salesmen or not, I'm not judging it. But it clearly resonates with the general population. And then I started thinking, but why doesn't like the Surgeon General's advice to social distance resonate with people in the same way? Like, what is it about the difference in the message that people will read a Deepak Chopra book and then think they're quantumly entangled with their soulmate somewhere, but they won't fucking stay 6 feet away from the person next to them in the grocery store?
Sheep.
Hey, wait. Okay, so while you think about that, let me give you an update on the Pittman farm. Tomorrow morning we are ordering 50.
You got sheep at the Pittman farm now?
50.
The answer to both questions?
50 chickens, man. Now this has become a tri-family operation, for the record.
Hey, I did predict that you would have chickens. It's just another one of my predictions that have come true.
I know, man. I had to feed that to you. There you go. So what is it? Why do we as humans, particularly let's say in the West, because I don't know how the East operates in this way, but in Western civilization, we crave somebody else telling us how to be better?
I don't know if it's necessarily that.
Okay.
I think that certainly in the last probably, in the age of the internet, and it precipitously gets faster and faster. I'll start. Like, what was the Senate designed to do? Why do we have 6-year terms? They were designed to be a deliberative body, right? Mm-hmm. And then the Congress was designed if you don't like your potholes in your street, go get yourself a new congressman. If you don't like your foreign policy, go get yourself a new senator. That's what was always said, right? Well, with the 24-hour news cycle, the internet, and all the things that make our life move at a much more rapid pace, there's no time for reflection.
Right.
That and
we don't. There is time. We choose.
Don't unbury the lead. All right. Don't unbury the lead. And just to amplify my point, nobody's got any patience anymore. Right? Dan just made my point for me. Nobody's got any patience. He knows where I want to get to, but they don't have any patience. And you can't skip the grind. The grind's going to get theirs, right? And if people don't feel they're where they need to be when they need to be there, they want to skip step. And most of it through envy, right? Most people truly haven't had an event that has set them back in a way that they've never experienced, right? Most people aren't where they think they should be because they want to be there, right? And I think there's less and less mentors in the world. More people are less accepting of others' opinions if they're in their sphere, right? We call each other all the time and ask each other, what do you think about this? And it's not necessarily tech related or anything like that. Hey, I'm going to do this, right? And one of you will say, that's dumb, or hey, that's a great idea. That's not what a preponderance of people do. And I'll take it into some of the stuff that I do. When you look at executives, right, and everybody's got a coach, right? Tony Robbins, the bulk of his business that you don't see is coaching Fortune 50 type people, right? And those leaders. Why? Because there is no handbook on how to be a CEO, right? You were a good CFO, you're a good COO. And all of a sudden, boom, you're elevated to this position. At some point during your career, you say, hey, I might want to be a CEO, right? You dovetail that in the military. You come in as a young officer, you're groomed by every position and everything that you do. And your ability to chart a course of continued growth gets you to a point where you've been told you should be a leader your whole career and accept that responsibility, right? I don't necessarily agree with it. What I'm saying is by the time you get there, you're expected to have a certain level. You look at companies right now, they're finally figuring out that keep your best players on the field, right? And there's in business where you get this, hey, I've got to have a coach. If you don't have a mentor, right? If you don't have somebody if you don't have other people you can bounce ideas off comfortably, and a lot of it is ego, right? I don't want to let people know I don't know everything, right? And this is in business. And so you'll go and get somebody to talk to, right? And a lot of it is, how do I, all the things that have come to the table, whether they're personal, business, or however that works, how do I manage that during a day? I mean, I've had a CEO say to me, he goes, TK, what happens when you hate the culture of your company, right? And I was like, I'm sorry, say it again, because it sounds like, you said, and it was like, you are the chief culture officer, right? And it's this, I was so invested in being the CFO or COO where I had my little piece of the kingdom to run. I didn't have to worry about everything else. And more importantly, I didn't have to turn it around from it not being about me and my little group band of people, but now I have to make it about everybody else. And the one thing that I tell people is like, at every stop of leadership, you need to, as much as you can, make it about everybody else, because the more senior you go, the more it truly is about everybody else. Right?
Sure.
You take that into personal life. A lot of people are just trying to bang on the easy button. And so whether it's, Tim Ferriss reading an article online, whatever, they're looking for an answer that says there's 10 steps. I've done 2 of them. I want to skip 4, 5, and 6 and get to the other part. What they don't understand is the emotional and intellectual satisfaction that you're going to have and preparedness you're going to have by doing 4, 5, and 6. Right. And I say that's why they don't make guys admirals right when they come out of the Naval Academy, because there's a lesson, right? There's things that have to be learned. There's gravitas, there's humility. And some people are truly in need, right? And they're psychological, they're not where they need to be. And here's the thing, I don't care whether you listen to Tim Ferriss, you listen to this, or one of your friends, you're walking through the park and they say something that becomes that epiphany. It's all about having this concept that, hey, I'm not right? I mean, I'm not correct, right?
Yes.
People get invested in themselves, and they get invested in it to a point where they can't admit they're wrong, right? And that continues to make things worse, right? You become dogmatic with your partners, right? If you're married, you're in a relationship, you become dogmatic with your partners, and you can't say I'm sorry. Right. And I always tell people, like, ego never hears the truth, period. Right. And some people are like, hey, if I'm paying somebody to give me an opinion of myself, it's more valuable because I paid you. I want an outcome. Right. I have an expectation. It's why CISOs and CIOs buy what's in the Gartner top right quadrant. Because if it goes wrong, they got a finger to point and go, hey, everybody in the industry trusts these guys. I trusted them too. You can't hold me accountable.
Right.
But what are you doing with yourself? How do you hold yourself accountable? How do you raise your hand and say, I'm effed up? My name's TK and I'm effed up. Right?
Right.
I have mentors I call. And I get into discussions with people sometimes, and people that are really close to me. And we're having a discussion, and everything I get back is just a defense of what I'm telling them. And
sure.
And until you can drop that veneer, you're not going to grow. You're like, I'm defending. I've got all my emotional people around me. My emotional sword bearers around me. And when somebody comes to me and I want to get out there and stab them and get back there, I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to say that I could have done things better or that I need to be different. I'm going to hold where I'm at, because where I'm at right now is not bad, but it's not good. And what pushes people in anything to say, whether it's paying for Tony Robbins, whatever, and I don't harsh anybody for how they spend their money on that, right? Everybody's, you can say this guy's snake oil, that guy's great, but it is what do you have, like, what journey you're on, whether it's Eastern, self-help, whatever it is, where do you find the thing that says, I'm going to be uncomfortable? Because most people detest discomfort more than discomfort and delayed gratification. And delayed gratification is really today's society. It's why people are out there commingling right now. Right? It's because, hey, I get it. If we all hide for a couple of weeks, then we'll probably narrow this down. Right. But no, I can't delay gratification. I've got to go out. I need to see somebody else. Right. I've got to have that human contact. I've got to do whatever I've got to do. But this is about dropping your ego, dropping your defense mechanisms and saying, I need help. And if somebody says, hey, $5,000 for 3 days doesn't sound that bad because I need help that badly. Right?
Yeah, sure.
That's, I think, really where it is, right? Because where do people turn? Where are the mentors, right? Whereas, in Native American culture, why was the chief so respected? Not because he was smarter, but because he had seen more turns of the sun and he had experience. And we don't necessarily listen to that. How many people are grateful? right? When something great happens in my life, I have one person for the most part I call all the time. I might not even call. I might just text and say thank you. And we've gotten to the point over the years to where he understands that, hey, it might not be directly attributable to him, but nothing happens in a vacuum. And most of the people that I encounter, either in personal life or in professional life, that are so rigid about standing in their little piece of the world and defending it to the hilt, it's a little bit of ego, and it's a lot of, I don't want to have to be uncomfortable and move. I want somebody to come into my sphere and be, it's the old thing. Relationships are 50-50, just not every day of the week.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's like flipping
even the one with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it gets right back down to the conversation I've had with others, and I asked them a simple question: do you want to be right and lose, or wrong and win? I want to win, so it doesn't have to be me. I could, if I'm wrong, the sooner I find out that I'm wrong, let's turn it around and get down to the point to where it's the win.
Right.
It's if you double down on bad decisions, then you end up out of a job. If you're the CEO, the board removes you.
Right. Well, most of the time.
Well, at a particular point, they're going to, because the stock price or something along those lines, the earnings per share falls below a certain point to where the stockholders are no longer willing to accept it.
I think you made a great point, Dan. And I think that, fail fast, right? That's what you're saying. Like, if I'm going to make a mistake, I want to fail fast, and I want to get back up, and I want to start moving again. A lot of people are so entrenched in what I kind of really like, gradients of failure, right? I want to just, I'm about to fail, so I'm going to go do something else. Well, sometimes you have to really hit the ground hard to figure out, okay, that wasn't even close to where I needed to be. I need to get out there. I think a lot of people's angst is you have to have the strength and resiliency to basically go, yeah, I failed, right? And go back to the Michael Jordan thing, right? What does he say in one of his things? 26 times I was entrusted with the last shot of the game, and I didn't make the shot. Because I fail, I win. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge part. Whether it's Michael Jackson, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, that's that mentality. It's like, I want the ball in my hands, right? And it's, as a parent for me, like watching the kids, but like, and it's why I think sports is so important for young people, is watching my daughter want the ball the last 5 seconds of a game, right? I don't care whether she makes the shot or not. That's a life skill that you can't change, right? And whether as a 9-year-old you didn't know it, and as you're getting better at it and you're overcoming all those hurdles, how many people, and again, I was having this discussion a few days ago with somebody else, and it was like, at what point does your own softness become your biggest detractor?
Yeah, sure. Well, then wouldn't you agree with the idea that as a mentor or a leader, part of your implicit role is to ensure the person that you're leading or mentoring is incrementally exposed to that chaos, so they get inoculated to it? So like, here's a perfect example of what you're talking about, right? So like, my daughter does not do well without getting a certain amount of sleep. She becomes unbearable the next day, right? And so like last night, she wants to spend the night at her cousin's house, who lives across the field, who has been quarantined longer than us, so we're safe being with them, right? And my wife says to me, well, I don't want to pay that price the next day, so I'm going to say no. And then we decided as a parental unit that what was more important than our own immediate gratification of not having to go through this pain today at some point is she has to learn how to deal with this. She has to learn how to deal with a lack of sleep and not be a raging bear the next day. And so if we continue to expose her to it and then guide her through the next day and point out where she's wrong and where she's right, it'll help her grow and be better. It's the same thing with basketball in that last 5 minutes, right?
Well, and this is something that we're going through right now. Most people have not had to go through, especially in the IT world, the types of exercise that we're doing right here at the moment. Mm-hmm. So the advice that I've been having to give my folks, because they're working now on basically day 20 in a row, 14-hour days, because we needed to get a lot of technology up for a lot of people with very little training to the end user and very little training to themselves. So I gave them a list of things to keep in mind during all of this time, which essentially was, hey, first, drink more water than you normally drink. Stay away from soda, stay away from junk food, drink some more water, don't drink caffeine as much, eat some healthy snacks, drink more water, and keep on going. And the very last thing I said, the reason why I keep telling you to drink more water is because then you're going to be spending a lot of time getting up to go to the bathroom, which is going to give you exercise. And so if you're constantly having to get up and get the blood flowing and you have all that water in you, you're going to be able to last longer when you're doing these complex technology things with your brain, because you need that blood flow. If you are just sitting at your desk and you're pounding caffeine or junk food, you're going to fail. And I've learned this over a career of having to spend, at XM Radio, at Homeland Security, of putting all these things out in these high pressure situations. So it's my job to keep them away from you and get rid of the craziness. Like I still can't get over the people that tell me right now they're working from home and they're like, I can't do my job because I don't have 2 monitors. I'm like, okay, well, and then maybe you should probably go into the office. That's my response.
That's the ultimate in first world problems, right? But again, I don't want to be put in a position of discomfort, right? Yeah. And it goes back to the mentoring. It's all thing. I mean, I believe that, we're actually, as a nation, right, and other countries as well, but as Americans, we've been so conditioned to not having discomfort, right? Look at the line at Chick-fil-A every afternoon at dinner, right? People leave work, they're like, I don't want to have the discomfort of having to wait to eat when I get home and cook a meal. So I'm going to go through the drive-through at God's Chicken, right? And I have to have that constant feeling of I'm not in discomfort is driving that, right? I need 2 monitors. Really? That's crazy.
No, it's not my IT people that are actually saying that.
No, I'm sure it's not. No, I know it's not.
Dual monitors. You've been in this company for like 20 years. Just 18 months ago, did they start giving out dual monitors to everyone?
See, and I think part of it too is what TK was saying earlier, where we're also in a place in our society right now in the cycle of, let's say, empires, where it's not okay to tell somebody they're full of shit. Like, listen, if you can't do your job on a 13-inch laptop screen, maybe what you're telling me, and this is the thing, right? The world I come from, and I think you guys do too, if I said that to somebody, they would tell me, then I guess you don't know how to do your job. Put your shit in a box and get out.
Yeah.
But you can't say that to anybody anymore.
I do it all the
society
time.
Says. Well, I know you do, but I'm saying society is not in a place where it empowers you to say, look, no, you're making an excuse for mediocrity and you want me to let you off the hook. You're feigning subservience and weakness, and that's not okay. Stop it. When you're really weak, you need help, and I'll help you, but don't fake it.
Right.
Yeah,
what really you just said is what is the solution for most business problems, right? And probably most interpersonal problems. Is like you're not doing your job, get out, right? The reason and thing is we've got to work from a position of empathy and accountability, right? And what you just said is like, look, I understand that you're not comfortable right now. I'm going to help you get comfortable, but at the end of the day, you got to realize it's not logical for you to say you can't do your job if you don't have 2 monitors. Is it less convenient for you to do your job? Absolutely, right? And I agree with that. And but right now we are not in normal times, right? So yes, you are going to be inconvenienced, and I want to help you get more. Think of it as how do you use your desktop? How do you manage your windows? Right, all those things that before we had dual monitor thing, we all learned how to manage our existence on our computer. I want to help you, but at the end of the day, you have to understand we're still paying you to do something, and we expect an outcome. And if it's a little bit delayed because of all this, I've got that built in. But at the end of it, you still have to produce. If you can't, that's a bigger problem.
That's right. Exactly.
That's what you just advocated for, and that's perfect.
Yeah. Dual monitors really help you to speed up what you're doing because you can see more landscape, so to speak, of what's out there. So it's just not going to be done as fast. You have one monitor and you have to they like to tell me, well, I've got this I've got this Excel spreadsheet. I was like, well, then put the proper headers on it, so that way, the top row continues to float, and put 2 on it. It's like, if I can do all of my MBA work on a 13-inch laptop screen, then so too can you look at a spreadsheet as well, because we're looking at real data as well. It's not like we're making up the data. We're getting a spreadsheet as if it was someone having to do the proper financial analysis on a case that's already been done. We have the same amount of rows, the same amount of columns that you have in a real business, because we're looking at real business data. So don't hand me that line of crap. You just can't do it as fast because you don't get to see as many at one time.
Right.
So what? It's what I tell the rest of the executive team, like, do you want dual monitors today, or do you want me to get 50% of our workforce that can work from home to work from home? Which is it? Because I can only do one or the other right now.
Yeah. Well, and doesn't that go back to
guess which they chose?
50% of the workforce.
Yeah.
I mean,
again, that's empathy and accountability, right? Sometimes you have to. I think a big thing that people don't get a lot of times, and I'll say that the person on the receiving end, they don't want a lot of times, is how do you manage up?
Yeah.
Right. That's a nuance that, all of a sudden you're on the executive team and you have to learn how to manage up. And most people, because if they're getting shouted down by that leader, they stop doing it. Right. And then that elicits more bad behavior. And you've heard me say this before. If I tell you no, or I tell you you're wrong and you get angry, does that mean I still shouldn't have told you?
No.
Right? But that's, it comes back to the integrity thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So I know this is going to be really difficult for both of you to hear and understand this. So brace yourself. Our topic was supposed to be about Zoom today. We haven't talked about it. Yeah. So I know this is probably a first, that I'm the one that's going to bring us to the topic.
I've been kind of waiting to see if Ken was going to show up, since he specifically requested.
Dude, that guy, he's been brainwashed with those AirPods, and it probably caused him to...
he's got him pushed into his head too far. They're starting to touch his brain.
Oh, poor Ken. Poor Ken.
Hey, if you don't want this, show up to defend yourself.
Yeah, well, right.
It wouldn't matter. He's gonna
hey, by the way, how do you guys like
AirPods?
How do you like my sloth mug?
I like it.
Nice.
My daughter made that. Well, they went to before COVID quarantined us. They like to go to a little ceramic place and paint.
Yeah.
And she knows one of my favorite spirit animals is an anteater. Whatever, dude. And they didn't have anteaters, so she thought the sloth was cute.
It could have been anything. It's from your baby girl, right? It's perfect.
Yeah.
Nice.
There, I derailed it so that you can put us back on the rails, Dan.
All right. So Zoom. We were talking about it last week.
Natural born seguer.
Yeah. We were talking about it last week as to how great of a product this is, and I will still tell everyone I think it's a great product. We are just like every other company that starts to be used quite heavily, they're going to have security and privacy issues because they had to get stuff out, and I don't think they took shortcuts. It just they weren't found. So if you're a company that has Zoom, I wouldn't sit there and tell you necessarily to go and replace it. I think that those people that are saying this is they've got security issues, and you should never use a company that has security issues. Well, this is probably breaking news to some of you. All products have security issues. I know. Microsoft has this thing called Patch Tuesday for a reason. The second Tuesday of every month, guess what they do? They fix about 1 million security holes every Patch Tuesday. So if those people that are out there saying, I'm not going to use a company that has security issues, you're still using Microsoft. You're still using Adobe. You're still probably using Java.
Unplug your computer if that's your intent.
Basically, if you're using it. Now, if you don't have a product, because what I don't like is what the CEO came out and said, and that we don't have a fix, and I can't tell you when. Yes, you can tell me when. You can tell all your developers you got 72 hours to fix this shit. I know that because I did the same thing. I told all the people we're going to fix this stuff in 72 hours, and we did. they chose to allow encryption keys to be shared in all their data centers. It's not just China, it's in any of their data centers. They didn't give the encryption keys to the actual end user, and they didn't tell people, there's some things, okay, yeah, they could have probably done a little bit better, but I'm not going to get off the bandwagon of Zoom and stop recommending it because it's a great product. But everything comes back down to your, what is it your attack surface is? Are you just doing stuff like what we're doing today? Are you teaching a class? Or are you trying to share personal identifiable information over something that may not be secure?
And if you are, there's products for that. It just doesn't happen to be Zoom right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Zoom's the victim of its own success, right? Because in the early days, you're end to end. How many people that bought it actually went and tried to say, "Hey, prove that it's end to end"? They just you used hope as a strategy, and you trusted that they did the math right, and put it together right. Right? We don't ever question the algorithms. We don't ever question the math. We question the implementation, right? And we made the assumption, right? Hopefully that they put it together, and the user base it had, it never really came up, right? But then you brought it up before the show. Nobody's at HIPAA said, "Hey, you can't use this anymore," and it's HIPAA compliant, right? Yeah. And I think we've now taken the shackles off telemedicine, right? But we were forced to, right? And so a lot of what people said, "Hey, this is important." And I think HIPAA is an anachronistic. I think the intent of HIPAA is, hey, we don't want PHI and PII out there. So how are we going to do that? Let's have a review of HIPAA in the deeper into the 21st century and say, what do we have to do that? Right? And there's plenty of tools out there.
Sure.
But this is one of those things where, like, with increased usership and any time, and it's not just technology, when you get to a certain level of success, everybody in life wants everybody else to be successful until they're more successful than them. Right? And now all of a sudden Zoom it jumped into that. We're more successful than everybody else, and they were everybody's darling. Well, what's the first thing that happens when that? You and I know, we know so many people that sit in their homes behind a computer screen, and the first thing they do when somebody's successful is they turn on them, not to say go fix the security hole, but to say gotcha.
Yep.
Right? And it's that is not only a personal culture thing, that is, in the tech world, it's absolutely horrible. Be proactive. And that's why, Dan, when you really went after and said, "Hey, we're not going to use the service," I'm not going to badmouth these, we're not going to use the service we were using to detect bugs when we were at Silencer. We're going to go through a bug bounty program. And we paid the people, we gave them acknowledgement. What do? You keep the hostile people away because you've given them no reason to be hostile. We came in and we said, "Hey, we want your help. We're a small little company. We need your help." Mm-hmm. Right? Zoom became that bigger victim of their success, and now people want to go after them. Right? The same things happen in the personal world. You start digging up people. You start looking at tweets from, there's athletes. The guy's a professional athlete, and 14 years ago in high school, he said something that is now considered inappropriate. We don't put a context or a timestamp on it, and now somebody's trying to explain something they did when they were 15 years old. Right? It's magnified in technology because everybody thinks they're the super wizard in technology, and most of them are sitting in their mom's basement for a reason. I hate to say it like that, but it's the truth.
It is true.
The thing that gets me that I cannot stand is this gotcha culture.
Yeah.
And in the security industry, it is almost 100% like that. These guys that and I hate that they constantly say ex-NSA hackers. Well, who the hell isn't at this point? Because they don't stay there very long. But they drop these 0 days instead of talking to the company and helping the company get through this. Instead, it appears as if they never even contacted them, just drop these things out on the public. And, now you've got hysteria already in a hysterical environment. I begin to appreciate much more people like JDuck who said, "Hey, Dan, I found a problem. When can I want to disclose this at DEF CON. Can we get this fixed before DEF CON?" Now, this was like 6 months in advance.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we can. And we did.
And thank you.
Yeah, and absolutely. If things got publicly disclosed, we fixed it in 72 hours. Other ones, we still fixed based on the criticality level. And we worked with that researcher to say, okay, what's the real way this could get done? How, and we would talk about if it was something like, oh yeah, they need physical access to the device, where I'm like, okay, well, this is not a critical, this is probably a medium based on how NIST calculates the CVSS. That isn't happening. They're just dropping these things out there in the public and trying to make companies look bad. That's what it looks like to me, and I cannot stand that part of the culture at all.
But it's guys, it's the reason that guys, Bruce Schneier and guys like Bruce Schneier are trusted agents and somewhat savant in this space, because they understood the concept of I'm gonna help be part of the solution. Yes, I'm gonna get credit for finding this because that's gonna help me get more work and all the things that we need intrinsically as people to grow. But this today, it's like you said, it's like, hey, gotcha. Well, okay, what how many hours, how many millions of man hours went into making Zoom, for example, right?
Sure.
And in at what stage does, hey, we've got 100 users and we've got 1 million users. What's the heavy lift to go from there to there, right? Mm-hmm. And then now we have 1 billion users, right? What are the unintended consequences of dealing with that? And it's like what you hear when people go, hey, it's easy to run $1 million company. It's harder to run a $10 million company. It's really a different animal, almost not in the same sport, to run a $1 billion company, right? Because of how the intertangled web of responsibilities and everything, and how big it gets and how much you can control. Did Zoom do the right thing on everything? Maybe, maybe not. But what we don't question when we start dropping 0 days was it malicious or not? Right? Was it just like, forget it, they're never going to look for it. This is the easy way for us to make money, right? And today, nobody, again, comes back to the easy button. Somebody just wants to be able to push a button on an app and use the app, and they don't want to question it. And when something's not perfect, it also feeds the ego of people that couldn't build it for themselves and say, look, oh yeah, these guys aren't any good. This is it, But I agree with you. There's a lot of great products out there, and if you want to guarantee that you're going to be end-to-end secure and you have to do those things, there are products out there. Guess what? You got to pay for them.
Yep. Yeah. WebEx, GoToMeeting, they are used to all these things. They're expensive, and that's because they're a true enterprise today product.
Right.
And this is what's, another thing that's funny is I had someone high up go, well, such and such financial institution, they're using Zoom. Why can't we? And I immediately go to, well, you're a parent. Don't you tell your kids all the time just because someone else is doing it doesn't mean that we should? It comes back down to at the time when whoever their CIO or CISO made the risk decision was based off the information we knew at the time. And if you had asked me this a week ago, I'd be like, yeah, sure, let's use Zoom. I'm comfortable enough because here's all the things that we can do. We can tell it, here's how we can do our encryption. Here's how this, here's how this, here's how this. I said, but I can't today knowing the current exploitable vulnerabilities that exist. So we need to find a different technology. A different product in that same technology space. They don't like hearing that. They like to hear, well, but I want to use it because what this other company is. Well, sorry, not going to happen. And last time I checked, I'm the person that's got to make the technology decision. Your job is to say, hey, I need to be able to do this over a video conference. Then I'll go find the right technology. You don't get to choose the technology product.
I think what you should say is, I'm the one that's going to be held accountable for the decision. Right.
Well, and I did, yeah.
And that, people, what a CEO should want to hear is somebody that says, I understand what you need, and I'm going to make the appropriate technology decision, understanding the accountability that I have. Right. And I'm going to stand behind it. I'm not going to push it off on Forrester or Gartner or anybody else. I'm going to say, this is what we did and this is why. And if you want me to tell you why I'm picking A against B in the beginning on any decision, why I'm picking A against B, I'm more than happy to do that, right? But it's always going to be thoughtful, and I'm always going to work from the place of mitigating risk, right? Because that's really what I'm doing. You're like, I'm going to mitigate risk, and I'm going to do it in a thoughtful manner, understanding that not being able to do it is not an option, right? That's the thing. Like, when we talk about mitigating risk, it's some of the more high risk things we used to do as SEALs. Like, we're going to jump out of the back of an airplane. I'm going to do it with a lot of stuff we used to call cage jumps, everything in your cage on your body when you jump out. I'm going to do that, right? So how over time do we create a thoughtful response, train people correctly, use the right gear, and it allows us to make a decision and execute what we know we need to do, but do it in a thoughtful and responsible manner.
Hey, look who joined.
An hour late.
Well, all right, everybody. It was good having the podcast this week. See you next week.
So it must have been your AirPods got burned out in your ears overnight because you're using wired today.
No,
You knew it was going to be the first thing out of this dude's
I
mouth.
know. Teaching online, you have to move to something that'll last more than an hour. So,
No, you don't. You're an hour late.
yeah.
How you doing, Ken?
Good. How are you guys?
I'm excellent.
Good.
Well, we're great. The adrenaline isn't pumping because we've been doing this for an hour.
Nice. Very nice.
And we just got done the Zoom discussion.
Oh, that's all right. That's okay.
Well, what do you
think about Zoom there, Ken?
I I don't know. I think you're kind of crazy if you use it right now, but that's just me. And our school is using it, so we, I don't think there was
Using it for what?
using it for classes.
teaching? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you consider that highly intellectual property that must be protected and secured?
I mean, for me, no. The only thing I would consider it an issue is maybe like in nursing and pharmacy, where they might have to talk about patient stuff. But I'm not. Since I'm not in that area, that's the only one I could think of at school that would be an issue.
Well,
Oh, in that area. Okay.
Yeah, just in that area in general.
I'm
For at
interested.
least our
So
school.
what do you think? Why do you say you're crazy if you use it today? If you're just using it for like classrooms or like something we're doing right now, it's nothing sensitive.
The one thing that scared me the most was when, and I can't remember who it was. I saw it on his blog. The guy who was doing the forensics on it found that they were rerouting it through China. Now, for us at our school, other than pharmacy or nursing, I don't see why it's an issue using it. But for corporate America, I mean, routing your transmissions through China is probably not the greatest idea. So I mean, as a regular corporation, probably not a good idea to be using Zoom.
I have a different issue with it.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh.
And this is actually every teleconference software that at least through my university we have access to use. I have the same issue with all of them. And that is by default guest access is enabled, which means either you can discover the link and access the room or people can share the link. So by virtue of that, like StreamYard that we're doing this podcast through, by default is invite only.
Mm.
And so I have to send you that invite and not everybody gets the same link. Okay.
Yeah.
And the actual URL changes every week.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
And that's what I noticed it doesn't do on Zoom.
They can. You have to enable it. So
yeah.
by default, like when you're talking about the security aspect, they have chosen by default to make everything convenient rather than now they've done it now with some cases where by default it's everyone joins the lobby and then they have to kind of come in. But why wasn't that done before? I mean, those are some things that it's easy for us to look back in time and say, yeah, you should have. But guess what? When I figured out that my users were doing this a while ago, I already created this guide and we'd go to the people and say, look, make sure you're doing these things because we can't, we don't have the full enterprise version. And even if we did, I don't even think I can control that from my side. I think it's got to be controlled still by the user. But we told them, like, look, this is how you're supposed to do this. But security by default was off for the most part.
Because this has turned into such a cultural phenomenon in just the last 2 weeks. It has its own name now. It's called Zoom bombing.
Yeah.
There's an entire subreddit to watch people get bombed through Zoom. And so now it's not an issue for me because I systematically disable guest access.
Yeah.
Well, and so to go a little deeper, here's why. I do it because it's very important to me that everything stays within the system of record. I don't want any type of information on my system. And so I do everything. We use Blackboard, which is our learning management system. And we use Collaborate, which is the video conferencing mechanism. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want guest access because I want people to have to log into Blackboard through their university Active Directory account. and then access the learning platform. And I do that so that all that information stays in the system of record and it's all trackable and I can report on it. Because at some point, somebody's going to ask me, well, how did you take attendance? If you enable guest access, you can't articulate how you tracked attendance in a meaningful way because you have guest access. You have no idea who that is.
Mhm.
So I do it so I force people to use their named accounts and I can track it. That's why.
So who was that cat that wound up going to jail because he figured out AT&T's bill? They weren't securing the link, and he could just change the number and wind up getting all these.
Was that the guy from Oklahoma
I
that
think so.
was using
I don't
the
know.
URL? I think he was using the URL and could see that on iPad signups that had cellular phone access, and he was
So that cat went,
yeah.
that cat went to jail for this because essentially he got convicted under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Blah 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 blah. So if people who are Zoom bombing, isn't that the same thing?
A girl just got picked up. Yeah.
Was that girl that was doing I think she was blonde, doing a bunch of them with the.
Now, to what degree she'll be prosecuted, I don't know. And I don't know that I have an opinion right now on to what degree she should be prosecuted. Or even if she should. I mean, I don't know. That seems to be a little bit of a gray area. But for the record, that's my only problem. And they all have it. Not one of them is exempt from that problem. They all enable guest access by default. I understand why. That's just my issue. I don't have an issue teaching over Blackboard Collaborate. Actually, I think it's a phenomenal tool. I think it's way better than Adobe's product, personally.
I tell you what, the Google Classroom that they're using in my daughter's classroom, it's a G Suite application. It's essentially G Suite for education. They've got that, default deny, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you either have default allow or default deny in life, and default deny for security is probably the better. And you have to selectively do that. They just expel the student. How you get expelled when you're doing a virtual thing is almost impossible with one exception, right? He shared the link.
Oh,
Yep.
Right. And then somebody from another, non-authorized, non-classroom attendant. And it's like basically having kids just walk into the middle of the class, metaphorically, and start talking and chatting and being disruptive. Right.
Yeah.
But not being in the middle of that from a security posture, from an administrative posture of thing, but knowing how G Suite functions, the default deny is very easy. And like you said, they give different links for every class. Every day it's a different one. The teachers have to be very proactive. They like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they're virtually in school where they're like we are, but they're 20, they're 15 wide with the classroom. That those are in the calendar, they're clicking on individual links that are forever changing. And I think they're doing a fantastic job.
I like Google's product. I've looked at it. We don't use it at the school.
Right.
I don't know if you guys have access to it, Ken.
we did.
It's compelling. It's really compelling. They do a good job with it, as opposed to Microsoft, who I wish did a better job. They're just stuck in having like this clunky interface. I don't know how else to say it. Like Teams. Like I really want to like Teams. The premise is really good, but it's fucking horrible to use. It's so slow. Jesus, man.
Have you guys got Google's coming out with Currents, and in their enterprise package that is supposed to be the Teams Slack collaboration tool killer for Google. They advertise it as if it already exists, but on all the accounts that I have, all the paid business accounts that I have, it's not available.
Yeah, I've not seen it.
And it's supposed to be, but Dan, you've talked on this a lot, that, I think a lot of what Microsoft is doing now to move everything out to the, to a web experience or, cloud-based experience is based on the fact that what I don't know, there's the answer I don't know. Of young companies that are starting up, how many of them just jump on the Microsoft train and just take whatever they're given, or say, look, I'm going to be more considered in what I do, and Google might be another option, right? And start to weigh it where, Dan, you're like, hey, if you don't have 400 or 500 people in your company, stick with Google. Well, as that grows, I think that number is going to grow.
I would say even more so. Like I don't know of any company that's just starting up that goes right to Office 365 because G Suite is pretty damn good.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I would say I would pick even today. I would have my company on G Suite. I don't care what size it is. The only thing they may be different is they may have Microsoft Office installed locally. They'd have a local
Right.
installation that I can manage, just because there are certain things Google Sheets can't do that Microsoft Excel can. Outside of that, I mean, I'd be G Suite all day. But here's a question for you all. Let's say the best collaboration suite out there from a usability and functionality was created by Facebook. Would you use it?
I wouldn't have a problem with it personally.
I know what Ken's going to say, but that's a...
Oh, man. For
your classroom. It's the best classroom experience that's out there today. If now, of course, this doesn't exist, but let's say Facebook is the one that created it, because Facebook's still, they're innovating a lot with a lot of different things, and they're buying companies up. Why would they not, in order to regain their market share back? They could come up with it tomorrow. Would you use it?
I mean, I wouldn't want to, but I also have to remind myself too that I'm not the IT department at work, and whatever they dictate goes on this machine. So, I mean, personally, I wouldn't want to use it, but if it was something that I could leave my personal information out of, then I would be okay with it. But I mean, personally, I probably wouldn't use it.
There's the point where Ken will bend on Facebook.
Dude, I hate that company. I've said it a million times. Mark Zuckerberg can die for all I care. So,
probably.
Dude,
so Jason, on our list of future sponsors, we just cross out Facebook. We need to call them.
Yeah.
Why do you say that? I mean, he's donating a lot of money to do some really, good things to society.
Well, that's.
Yeah. Is he just covering up his guilt?
I guess I guess you could say the same thing about Amazon too, and Jeff Bezos. I mean, given $100 million, I mean, that's nothing that's pocket change to him.
Perfect. You said exactly what I wanted you to say. You said exactly what I was saying. Why are you so ego driven about it? That somebody does something nice, and from the couch 3,000 miles away, it could be 3 planets away, we want to start to say he's not nice enough.
No, and that's
what you just said.
I don't disagree.
That's part of the cancel culture. That's part of everything. Guys donating $1 million. Well, that's
I know,
enough because
but I will say at the same time, he only did that $100 million after his people in their warehouses started saying, "This is crazy. You're not taking care of us." Now, there are plenty of look. I'm a huge Bill Gates fan. I may not be a huge Microsoft fan, but I like Bill Gates. He was working on this before the administration was bumbling it, or basically the entire Senate and House too. Well, he was doing it.
The motivation matters more.
I think the motivation matters to me more. Look, that's great. Jeff Bezos did that, but I think he did it only because his PR team told him that.
Well, maybe who knows why he did it? Maybe the devil told him to do it. The fact is, he did it. Let's not forget how much of a ruthless prick Bill Gates is.
Oh, I agree.
I mean, there were multiple movies made about the deaths that he personally would go to.
I know. And TK probably he has a legit point.
Most people get into their fields, right? I feel that they should be giving more.
Sure.
And don't take it on face value. And again, most everything that's positive that's ever happened in humanity has been through opposition, which is why we always say on the show, like, not letting people get out there and voice their opinion, good or bad, put it in the public space. If it percolates to the top and it survives, it's good. But getting somebody to do something sometimes because they have to be shown that they should be doing it doesn't mean they did the wrong thing, or they only did it because. Well, yeah. How many decisions in your life do you make in a vacuum by yourself that you with no outside input? Just I'm going to be great today. No, everybody looks at everything else.
Sure.
But we've gotten to this. We got to get into our fields. And then we got to justify whether that person's good enough. I saw a great meme the other day because, Bill Gates, one of the things he's come out is he says, global population or overpopulation is going to be our big problem as we approach the 22nd century. And there was a picture of him and it says, hey, this guy wants to make sure everybody has a vaccine while he says the planet's overpopulated. Do you trust it? right? It's not just about like him personally, but what's the motivation, right? And so I don't necessarily agree with that point of view, but everybody, I think he's been very benevolent in his Microsoft retirement. But like I used to say to my kids about their grandmother, my mother, before she passed away, it's like when she was nice to him, like telling me not to like yell at the kids for something she'd have knocked my head off for. I was like, hey, don't worry about it. To my kids, she's old and she's trying to get into heaven now.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Look at, Rockefeller, Carnegie, like look at the names. They were all tyrannical business people. And then when they were in, we've forgotten about it 100 years later because their names on the side of museums everywhere. And
Right.
that's why
They had to pay for it by being tyrannical.
What's that?
That they paid for with the money that they achieved
Right.
by being tyrannical,
And,
which I can appreciate.
I don't, like I said, so can I, right? And we have, in the U.S. in particular, have allowed that behavior because we've legislated that amount of graft, right?
I think that's only happened around social media. I don't remember that ever hearing about that growing up when there was an issue and someone gave a lot of money. I mean,
we didn't have access to the news.
Part of it's
That's my
virtue
point.
signaling, but here's a better question for you guys. Okay, so let's see where this goes. Is tyranny a prerequisite for success? Whether that's you tyrannizing yourself through discipline and not allowing yourself to do things that don't contribute to you moving forward, or you, if you're a captain of industry, being tyrannical to that industry.
So I think it's an interesting question because we could take a look at how, in some ways, how democracies form. They form from the government down because through a revolution, whereas Britain through the Industrial Revolution was the only country of significance that had actually started from the people up in order to make it happen. So they say essentially you had to have a tyrant, in many ways, give up power in order to be able to have a type of democracy. So, in a way, I think you have to be somewhat tyrannical in order to provide better for society for whatever's next.
And somebody's got to make difficult decisions. I mean, it's just the way business is. Do you think Dell or Steve Jobs were, or even Bezos, wanted to play fair and to get up to the top? I mean, if they played fair, Amazon may not be what it is now.
No, I think they wanted to win.
They wanted to win, and that's
what do you mean by fair? Why do you think that they didn't do it fairly?
Why do they? Well, probably because the massive amounts of money they use for lobbying. That would be
Is that
one.
part of the rules. Did they play by the? Are you saying they didn't play by the rules, or did they use the rules to their advantage?
That's probably your latter point is probably the case. They use the rules to their advantage. With the amount of money. I mean, let's just stick with Microsoft or Amazon. I mean, I remember the big lawsuit with Microsoft. All came down to them bundling Internet Explorer. And
how come Apple hasn't faced the same? Why do you think Apple hasn't faced the same challenges? Because I mean, they've got a very
they are now. They are right now, though. I mean, they're being sued in the Apple Store right now, over the App Store right now. And I can't remember what it specifically was over, but it was about them taking such a high cut of every app sold. I think it's like 30%.
It is.
Yeah.
But I don't think Apple will ever get sued in the same way for the same things that Microsoft did, for the simple reason that they don't allow the installation of their software on somebody else's hardware. That was
they also don't have the market share either.
Let's look at the Amazon thing, right? You take away 30% of every online sale that Amazon makes. Their pricing structure has to be demonstrably different to sell through iOS than it does through Android, right? Mm-hmm. You just can't. That's not a thing. And Apple wants to make their money, right? And you can disagree with 30% of thing, but there's ways that Apple allows you to not have to do 30% of every dollar for people using their app, how you can sign up for subscriptions, what you are required to do on an iOS device, and what you can put off to the web, and that balance. And we went through some of that at Silent Circle, right? But the net of this is, up until recently, if I had Kindle, for example, or even going through the Amazon store and I wanted to buy a book, I couldn't do it on an iOS device, right? And so as Apple, I'm trying to make people not leave my device
Right.
and go somewhere else to get the solution.
Yeah, their
This isn't
ecosystem.
about Amazon, right? Amazon said, hey, we'll push all the information. We'll allow you to buy anything we have, and we'll do it here, right? Amazon or Apple has Apple Books, right? Well, when your customer base says, hey, my primary mechanism for getting some goods or services is through this, I don't necessarily want to use you. Think, how long did they keep Google products or want to, make it hard for you to have Google on there, right? But at the end of it, Apple, just like any other company that sells things to the public, has to be reactive to their customer base.
Right.
And I don't think they're being malicious or anything. They said, hey, here's what we want to do, right? Here's what we have to do to have continued success and growth. Look at Samsung. Samsung desperately wants to get out of being known as a handset manufacturer. They want to be known as a content provider, right? And how are they doing that, right?
By making dishwashers.
Well, yeah,
And
because I think you look at, and I think we talked about this before. I went and helped my daughter volunteer at an assisted living facility where it's all elderly people, and it was all about how to make using their mobile devices more convenient for them, because that's how they communicate with their grandkids and everybody. And what the biggest problems I saw were specifically with folks that had Samsung devices, because they want pictures and they want to be able to talk. And you had, Google Photos, and you also had Samsung Photos, right? Because they're trying to say, we want to store your content, we want to make money off that stuff, and that caused confusion. Where if you gave everybody else, a lower end phone from another manufacturer, or you went high end, but you went with one of the Google phones, and you get that clean experience. With Amazon and Apple in particular, you have two behemoths that have to learn how to coexist. And I don't think Amazon was being a bully, because forever they just kind of worked behind the scenes to say, hey, eventually people are going to rebel about not being able to download a book, right? And so for me, and it's the user thing. The more I keep this in my hand, the more Apple is happy.
yeah,
Right? So they make a business decision, and I don't think there's anything tyrannical. I think this is just straight up business 101. And I think it's amazing because it worked itself out, and it worked itself out to the benefit of the consumer.
Yeah. So I got another question for you, Ken, since you brought up Zoom routing through China. Let's say no matter what company you like, you only have two choices. Your data can route through China or Russia. Which one do you take?
Before you answer that, I got a quick point of clarification, and I'm trying to clarify the facts. Was the traffic routing through mainland China or through Hong Kong? Because Hong Kong is not China.
They have a data center in Hong Kong.
Okay, so that's Hong Kong, not China.
yeah.
So you really want to get political then, right? So, but regardless, I'm curious, do you want your data to route through China or Russia? That's the only two choices you've got.
This is what happens when you're an hour late, bro.
I know.
We're all sitting there looking at.
I mean, if I'm looking at it from a corporate perspective, I probably would rather have it Russia. And I will tell you why, because I don't think they quite have, if they're going to steal something, they really don't have the capabilities that China has, in my opinion.
So you're basically, you've got a product, and Huawei's going to steal it, so that's why you want to go to Russia, because they don't.
I would rather go to Russia than China, purely on that. But I mean, if you don't have a choice, Russia would be my first one.
Okay, all right.
I just, every day we see, and I have a lecture over the Chinese stealing intellectual property, and they're just voracious about it.
Well, of course they haven't. It's. I find it interesting that after President Obama came into power, they no longer fully publish the NCIX reports. which is the National Counterintelligence Executive, which shows where all the intellectual property by which country has stolen it.
Stolen,
In the beginning, when they first started coming out, Israel stole more intellectual property than China, and then China just became, voracious and made Israel, in this case, look like a bunch of amateurs. They did, but yeah. What about you, TK? Where would you want your data to go through?
I'd probably say Russia as well. Right? And there's a great book out, has nothing to do with technology, but has everything to do with this concept of stealing IP, right? Jason, you live in North Carolina. It used to be if not the furniture capital making of America. It was close, right? And there was a company in North Carolina that built these cabinets, right? And slowly but surely, they started to see the Japanese imports come in, and eventually, the company was going to go out of business. And the owner, founder owner, and been in his family for generations, wanted to find out why. So he went on this sojourn to China and literally had to go to the backwater of China to find out where this was going to be. And it really put a highlight in a very, and it's something that's very tangible and some that is made at the speed of smell as opposed to software being made at the speed of light, of how the Chinese have done this. They got a copy of it. They made it. They made it better and cheaper, right? And so this guy basically was put out of business by his own product, and he finally got down to it. And I think with regards to like making phones, like there's no labor discount on making phones anymore in China, right? And the CEO of Apple talks about this all the time. In America, we've given up on the trades, right? We told everybody that we don't have to have trades or anything. Well, one of the trades in China is the exacting nature with which you build consumer electronics. And they're magical at it. They have very high quality outcomes. Their QA is amazing, right? And because of it, and our insatiable need for those consumer electronics, they've been made in China for so long now that what factory could we fire up in the U.S. or in Western Europe and that could do that? None.
In 3 days, too.
Well, not even in 3 days, right? If the factory existed and all we had to do was go and flip the lights on and go, where are the exact artisans to build that? They're not. Now, China over the years has been known to, hey, yeah, come here, start a company. You have to have co-ownership in the company, and then 2 years later, all of a sudden, there's another company down the street that looks exactly like yours, and there's no more market for what you build, right? So let's not fool ourselves. But when it comes to the manufacture of electronics, part of this is on us because we don't have the workforce that can build this in an exacting fashion today, right?
Right.
Do we have a pharmaceutical industry that we could become less reliant on the supply chain from China? Yes, right? Would the cost be different? Maybe. I don't know. Probably nobody's really thought about that in a long time. So when you say we want to have, and at this point now, a lot of people that a month ago would have said a statement like that is xenophobic are saying, we probably got to think about that, right? We're the only country on earth that, given our natural resources and intellect, could be completely self-sufficient, right?
Yeah.
We're a net exporter of energy now.
Yeah.
Right. And things like that. That's the thought process that I look at when I say China. Russia has different desires and means for that. There's no what's the big manufacturing thing that Russia did? Russia's a provider of energy.
Yeah.
Right? And there's satellites, right? That's what's really important to them. This $20 a barrel is killing them more than anything.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so even in the US, like the oil sands, right? What do we have to be at per barrel for that to be profitable? It's a lot. Did you
see that was at a negative 19 cents
a
barrel?
It's a lot more. Yeah, it's a lot more than $20 a barrel, right? Yeah, because that process is hugely expensive. We have almost an unlimited amount of natural gas right now, to the point where we've got to figure out how to get it distributed, right? And so to me, that's when you start looking at like, what's the net? What do I lose by routing it through Russia, and what do I lose by routing it through China? Right? Russia has different goals for why they want your data and why they want to manipulate data than China does. China always has an economic case to make for that. Russia sometimes does.
Right.
What about you, Jason? Which way do you, China or Russia?
If I had to choose one of the two and I can't come up with a third choice,
Correct.
I'd probably pick Russia.
Yeah,
The Chinese are going to steal what you pass across the wire. The Russians are going to try and blackmail you with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tend to kind of agree, and I think it's kind of somewhat funny that we would choose those that we've kind of been taught want to kill us. At least since I've been born, Russians are bad, they're evil, they want to kill everyone. Whereas the Chinese, they want to take everything and basically run all the economy through them. They want to steal it. And we find someone that would rather try to do us physical harm better than those that want to steal our ideas.
Right.
That to me is what I find kind of funny about it, because I would also choose Russia. I think
and it tells you where we put our value.
Yeah, what Gopi used to say, my former boss at the last bank that I was at, who's from India, he would always compare certain different things to like a cobra, and whether or not he would rather have that person as a friend or a cobra. And a lot of times he goes, I would choose the cobra. And I'm like, you have to explain this to me. He goes, because I might live from the cobra bite, but I know that person's going to kill me from behind. So, I would.
And I've heard this subsequent. The first time I heard what I'm going to ask you guys, I was at an event in Birmingham, Alabama. Birmingham is the epicenter for having made AIDS or HIV chronic, right? And it's probably the most quiet medical advance that's ever gotten through, right? The only reason this generation of drugs not only stops the advance of the disease, it makes you non-communicable, okay? And I was at an event, there was the deputy ambassador from South Africa was there, and all these doctors from UAB, University of Alabama, Birmingham. They have about 600 doctors, and they go back and forth between Africa and the U.S., and it's literally where the magic happens with HIV research. And whether this was an orthopedic surgeon or one of the researchers that's really at the forefront of containing and making HIV something that's chronic, they'll tell you this: the reason that HIV still exists and is alive on the African continent is because of shame. People don't want to go and get tested and get their drugs. Okay. Now, 20 plus years ago, or 30, going back to Magic Johnson had to take a very complex cocktail of drugs. It was, I take something, 7.5 minutes later, I take something else, an hour after that. And so all day it was this constant battle to stay alive through medicine.
Right.
In the mid to late 90s, the pharmaceutical companies were just getting crapped on every day of the week by every do-gooder. And I say that tongue in cheek, to give the medication to the African countries. All right. The problem was it was still a very complex cocktail. But in sub-Saharan Africa, you know why that would have never worked? Because they can't tell time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's a simple fact, right? It's, whether we want to lament that or whatever, they can't tell time. So telling somebody and giving them a set of instructions for somebody that can't tell time is useless. They would have still died. So the research that by executive order, probably one of the last things that George W. Bush did before he left office was an executive order that got this funded and got this level of attention, right, to make it to where we're at today, and it's really pushed that forward. The question is this, because right now it's magic. Like, it's 3 times a day: when the sun comes up, when the sun is high, and when the sun goes down. I can give instructions to people in a way that they understand. The next thing is once a day, and then a shot every 5 years. That's the trajectory that we're on, right? And that's a general positive trajectory for anything, right? That's how we cure most things, right? We find an acute way to take care of it, then we find a global way to take care of it. Here's the question: you have to pick one of these diseases. You can't say no. I'm either going to say you have to have HIV, or diabetes? Which one do you want?
Oh, I'm taking HIV.
Yeah, I would
I
too.
like all of my limbs, and I know I'm going to be alive.
Right. And that's exactly what healthcare professionals say. And people used to be, oh my goodness, why? Because there are folks in our age group that remember when HIV was a guaranteed death sentence.
Right.
Right. And all of these doctors are panic stricken by diabetes, right? Because we don't know how to contain it. We're still, it's a nascent thing, right? The bigger problem with diabetes, and they'll say this about HIV patients. HIV patients are going to die from diabetes. They're going to die from obesity. They're going to die from cardiac, everything everybody else does. Their statement, and I tend to agree with them, is life choices matter, right? And whether it's diabetes or anything else, once you've contained and made chronic something that was a death sentence, you've now given somebody an easy button. And I'm not talking about to be irresponsible with sexual practice or anything else like that. I'm saying there's a great study out there right now, and it's called Death Row Diet, right? And we look at why people ignore their own safety via food and everything else, and we have an obesity epidemic, and we have everything else, right? Nobody asks for tofu for their last meal, right?
Right.
And so why do we do that?
Wait, you don't think a vegan's going to ask for tofu for their last meal?
Well, they may. But
How many Viagra and death row inmates is there?
Yeah, you might want to go.
I don't know. I was wondering, with the same with the anti-vaxxers, if whether or not if they had COVID, whether or not if their vaccine was available, would they take it? Same thing like with those strict vegetarians, if they were on death row, would their last meal still be vegan?
Right, but that's but think about that. Like when we start thinking in the macro like that, is what do we do to take care of ourselves, right? Do you make life choices that are in your favor, or do you take convenience, right? Because you find momentary satiation in something and long-term bad benefit. But what do we want? We want to be able to walk into a doctor and get a pill. What do we want right now with COVID? We want to be able to do what we want, when we want. We want the government to figure it out. Is it a shot, pill, something they spray in my eye, right? I don't know, do something, but make this go away today because I'm being inconvenienced and it doesn't make me happy right now.
Right. I think it's like the theme for today's show, actually. It's less Zoom and more about the immediacy or long-term trade-off.
But Zoom is part of that, right? People now found their security holes in it. Like, okay, at what point is the risk not worth the reward or worth, the food pellet I get, the metaphorical, like I've gotten what I want right now. And
it also conveniently allows us collectively as a society to continue to ignore the root issue, which is how hard secure messaging actually is.
Right.
We can distract, let's just switch to blue jeans or what the fuck ever. Let's not deal with the core problem because that's the hard part. It's easier just to say Zoom sucks. I'm going to use this other tool.
Right. Well, I mean, and I think, right now, and I'll use the thing, Wickr, I think is kicking ass.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they are end-to-end encrypted. And they're price competitive with Zoom, Blue Jeans, and all the rest.
But you know what? And I'll but also say this. For a small university where I'm at, being able to right now academic institutions are in financial difficulties. Enrollment's down. They may not state it publicly, but that's where a lot of schools are. So that's what we're facing right now. Then all of a sudden you have this pandemic show up and budgets are being slashed at schools. And so now IT's having to say, Zoom versus, let's just go back to what you said, TK, Wickr, which is going to cost some money. And so Zoom becomes the de facto standard for most universities and, K through 12.
Under 45 minutes.
Do what?
As long as you keep your class under 45 minutes.
That's right. And we're not spending any money. And then, also balancing the idea of what kind of privacy are we giving up. That was probably the furthest thing from IT's thoughts at that moment, and many IT departments, with the exception of corporate America, I would bet. But Like I told my students had asked, have you ever lived through anything like this? I said, yeah. I mean, no, but 9/11 was the closest thing, but we were sent home for 3 days. There was no remote work. So I said, this is a really once in a lifetime opportunity, hopefully. But it's either the free one or pay for Wickr. And a lot of people are saying, and this is how we've been raised. This kind of goes back to our iOS and Android thing. There's a lot of free things that we use, and our data is the product.
Right.
Well,
let me ask you.
And so there's no getting around that.
What does your university use as their education product? Like, Jason uses Blackboard. You guys use Google Chrome. Google.
We dropped a Blackboard and went to Canvas, and it has some phenomenal products to work with it. The only downside, and this is kind of from third-party hearing and understanding, is there's just a limit on how much we can store, which is kind of ironic considering the era we live in.
Right.
But I think it has
an integration with Box.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think you have to pay for a certain amount of cloud storage. And I think that's kind of where our school, and I'm just speaking from third hand, I think that's always been a problem for us, is these lectures that we're going to record. Because I remember us having this conversation 3 weeks ago before we decided to put everything online, and Zoom has that limitation for us. And so everything is stored locally on our device. And if you inadvertently hit the cloud button, you're going to hear from IT that says you either delete it or we will. So I think that kind of goes back to that. But I wanted to go back to something you mentioned about 15 minutes ago, TK, was we're not a trade society. And it's interesting you say that. Living in Tennessee, we have free community college for 2 years, but we also added into that trade schools. So if you want to go into anything from cosmetology to welding, the state pays for that. And so, I saw this slowly start changing, a couple years ago. That's been in the news here in Tennessee about we need more tradespeople. And, it's nothing for a welder to get out of here and make $60,000, $70,000 a year as a new hire.
Right.
And that's better than some, if not many, of the IT jobs I send my 4-year students out at.
Well, so around here, we have Newport News Shipbuilding. They have what they call the apprentice school, where you can go learn welding, all the electrical trades and everything like that to build ships. And, welders were not you could raise a family, but you weren't going to be wealthy, right? You weren't going to be considered to be middle or upper middle class, right? Well, they're in such a panic right now because the generation of welders that are, can weld on nuclear ships and things like that, they're old. And because we went through this thing where, hey, we're too good to work with our hands, in my opinion. And now that's at a premium. And it's funny, you look at what a welder's making now. Why? It's supply and demand. Right? And I tell people all the time, you want to go weld, go to Newport News Shipbuilding. Not only will they pay you full time to go to school, right? You're effectively an employee of the shipyard, but then you're going to go out and weld on something that has very exacting standards. If you want to go build motorcycles, build buildings or whatever, you're set up for the rest of your life because you've learned at the best place, right? Dan, why did you pick the university you picked to get your master's at, to get your MBA at? Why? Because you felt that that's
a loaded question.
Well, no, but you make a decision. Like you could have easily said, hey, I'm going to go to some school that I want to get those letters behind my name, right? There's always that, right? People end up letter hunting, right?
So my stepfather was he was a master welder, and he learned it by being in the Navy.
Right. You want to talk about workforce education, right? Which is really what we're talking about when you talk about the trades. We're talking about workforce education. There's I think it's the University of Southern Illinois. They have a bachelor's degree in workforce education. They built it solely to help people that have been Navy instructors in all the trades and everything. It was a great way to get people educated. And you can get a bachelor's in workforce education. And it largely is built around how to do educational design for the trades. right? And that's we're going to, if we want to continue to build skyscrapers and do all the other things, we need far fewer architects than we do masons, bricklayers, steel workers, electricians, and things like that. That will fuel a renaissance. Right? My son was getting ready to graduate college in December, and he'll tell you that he wants to go learn how to weld. Right? Why? Because he wants to do something with his hands. Right? And I'm like, yeah, go to Newport News if you want to learn how to weld. Right? And even now, there's a lot of companies that will pay people to come in and learn, because it's like everything else. Like there's a dearth of truck drivers in America. Why? What's the number one reason that people can't get a job driving a truck?
Probably drugs or alcohol.
Can't pass the drug screening.
Right.
Right. That's, if you are unemployed or underemployed, and that is a better career opportunity than what you currently have, you have the power, right, to do that. And I agree that there are a lot of places that are making an unbelievable renaissance at trying to get the trades back in. But as a nation, right, everybody wants to have the local example. That's why I didn't bring up Newport News Shipbuilding. Everybody wants to have a local example. But as a nation, we've lost that investment in blue collar, right? And some of it's sociological and done for the best intent, but has a bad outcome. The intent is, and this goes back to the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I want a better outcome for my kids in life than I have. I want them to do better than I do, right? If you go to England, right? I had friends of mine when I was living there. They're like, hey, if working in the mines was good enough for me and my dad, it's good enough for my kids. Right? It's a completely different mindset. Now, it's fueled by what I largely believe is still a caste system that exists there, right? You're either, and I ask people a lot of times where they went to school, like high school, grade school. If they tell me they went to public school, it means they went to private school in the U.S., right? Or they went to grammar school, it means they went to what we would call an academy program here in public schools, right? Or then there's what goes on to the masses. I hope you make it to 16 and then you can get out and go in the workforce at some low-level job, right? And usually if your dad was an engineer, then you're going to go to grammar school. If your parents were of means and part of the aristocracy, you're going to go to public school. And so it's very easy to define. One of the hallmarks of America was that you could overcome that. Right now, if your parents make less than, I think, 80 grand a year, and you can get into Harvard academically, you're not going to pay to go there.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's not all good or it's not all bad, but we've mistaken a college education for the ability to do better. And I'm not going to say that by and large, if you have a college education, you're setting yourself up for failure, because I believe in knowledge. But we have to think about what we're doing and why, and not be so restrictive in what we're doing, and not say, oh man, he just wanted to go learn how to fix cars. Well, what's fixing the car these days? There's a lot of computer stuff in there too, right? How many computers? I mean, Dan, in your Mercedes, how many computers are there?
I couldn't even tell you.
There's 22.
I have a Leaf. I can't. If I can change the car and change the windshield wiping fluid, I'm good. I'm lucky.
Right. And so there's no shade tree mechanics anymore. Right? Everybody's got to take their car, and it's another thing where they're like, every auto dealership around here can't find ACE certified mechanics.
Yeah.
Right. But people are gravitating back towards that, because there is, like, you look at people that love construction, for example. Why do they love that? Because at the end of the day, they can be done, turn around, and tangibly see, here's where I was at when I started.
Yeah.
Here's where I'm at when I was better, and when I left the day. And there's a thing, and some days at work, what I do, what you guys all do, can you do that? As educators, though, you guys, you can see that, right? You're in class, and you can look at somebody and see when the light comes on and get that gratification. They're like, okay, that person fundamentally didn't understand something when they walked in here, and now they do.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because I would argue, I don't know if you agree with me, Ken. The academics are on the left side of my screen. You know what I mean? This is interesting the way this breaks down. Check this out. To me, part of the reason why the trades are so important isn't what you're saying. I agree with you in terms of we actually need people to do that work, and it's not even that it's honorable. I mean, it's necessary for society to function and grow. It's
Sure.
right. The other thing too is I think, at least for me, Ken, in my experience, all the schools I've taught at, Cal State to Capital to HPU, there's a large portion of the people that are there that ought to be in a trade. They'd be way better off.
Yeah.
Not because of their intellectual capacity, but because of what they're looking for in life.
Right.
Sure.
And if they were gone, not only would they be happier, but I would be happier, because then I can focus on the people that ought to be in a 4-year for what a 4-year should be. And so that's a different angle of the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's
And
not
two things,
better.
though, we can't tell them that.
Well,
That's the school would absolutely lose
Right.
their minds.
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you're not, the school as an institution is not necessarily in it for the betterment of the next generation. They're also self-survival.
They're not
and it-
incentivized, right? As we say.
Yeah. It comes down, to me, when people say, hey, there's a shortage in computer science and cybersecurity, blah, blah, blah. Well, that doesn't mean that everyone's going to be able to do it. I mean, you could go to anywhere and people aren't going to be able to just wake up after 4 years of school and be a good developer or cybersecurity or whatever out there. If you're not interested in it, you're going to be average at best.
Right. It's not like the word's not out that cybersecurity is a hot career field, right? I mean, that's, we as a society, we're pretty good at that. And everybody says, oh, I want to be in cyber. Well, everybody wants to be in cyber on Friday afternoon when everything's up and running. Nobody wants to be in cyber on
Saturday and Sunday.
At 2 a.m. when it all goes wrong, right? But that's about a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
Right. And I am totally, again, it comes back to me to, actually, I'll take it back one step further. Do you guys, I know there's a book out there and it's written by a father and son. And in the Hamptons, Long Island somewhere, in one of these upper middle class school districts, there was a kid that had gotten college scholarships academically and athletically to go to do great things, right? And I say that in air quotes. The kid chose to join the Marine Corps. The school board actually had a meeting at graduate before this, like, what did we do wrong? Right? And it was a big thing. And even the kid's father was in there invested in, like, what did you guys do wrong? Right? Like, it was, when did the defense of the nation become somebody else's job? Right? And that's really was where I caught on to it. The book starts with kind of that. And then it molds into boot camp for the Marine Corps is, I think, 13 weeks long. It's much longer than any other boot camp. His dad went to the graduation. And he went to the graduation not as a proud parent, but as a parent, right? And what he experienced there was, all of a sudden, it was everybody in the culture that they had never touched before in their life, right? For those people that don't know it, the Marine Corps is by far the most diverse service. In fact, I'm pretty sure that Caucasians are not the majority of the Marine Corps. Right? I think Hispanics make up the largest portion of the Marine Corps now. While he was there, this kid's new best friend was a kid that used to be a gangbanger in some major city. And he said to the kid's father this. He goes, before I went to boot camp, before I went through this experience, I'd have killed your son on sight because he was white. Right? And he had a transformative experience along with everybody else. Mm-hmm. It followed this journey. And the father's piece of this was an emotional and intellectual awakening that just because my son wanted to do something different, it wasn't wrong. Right?
Right.
In school districts, and a lot of this comes with private schools in particular. Some of the schools, if a child decides to go to community college right out of high school instead of going to a 4-year university, they don't even they'll put the acceptance of where all these kids got accepted to, right? And they're doing it as a recruiting tool to the parents, right? They're like, if you spend this money, then we have a rigorous curriculum, and your child will go to a top name university, and they put the amount of money and scholarships the kids got and everything. They didn't even list the community colleges, right? And if you go ask the school, oh, we're sorry we did that.
Right.
Sure you are.
Yeah,
right? You basically just said, we're not worried about that. Right? That doesn't fit our narrative. Right? And in large measure, I should say, that's not intentional. It's not like people said, "Oh, the government serving the military is not a thing," or going to a community college is bad. But every step along the way is trying to ensure their financial survival. And like what you said, if you have a student sitting in class like, well, you'd be better off for doing X, Y, or Z that doesn't include them paying tuition the next semester at your university, you're going to be thought of as that's a bad outcome.
Right.
Right.
I think, the other thing too is, and I'm not going to blame the president for it, but Obama had really pressed for everyone to go to college. And I think that idea, I mean, having been a teacher for almost 11 years now, I mean, I've had a couple of students every semester that really were not college material, but their parents were pressing them to do that. And that idea that, going back to what Dan said earlier, we're not going to, after 4 years, someone's not going to be a cybersecurity expert. I mean, they're still pretty green. And I think that's kind of the way with colleges. We've kind of told everybody, if you want to get ahead in life, that's what you got to do. And not everybody needs
to agree with that. But here's the
Okay.
problem. It's what I call the prerequisite culture. Right? Is the prerequisite for most jobs a bachelor's degree?
Yeah.
Should it be? Right? You know what I mean? I think when I say is it necessary in most jobs to have a bachelor's degree?
Is it or should it? Sorry.
Right? Yeah, should it? I mean, should it be? But when I say is it really necessary, right? Should it be a requirement? And is the tighter the job market gets, right? As you notice, like in the past couple of years, when we went to like functionally full employment, all of a sudden, all of these requirements, like a bachelor's degree and 5 years of experience and all that stuff, drop down to the desired group.
Yeah.
There are certain things that you need to have a degree for, right? And like I tell people, if you have a passion for medicine, go be a doctor. If you have a passion for helping, all of these things, and there are certain things like the passion and dedication it took the three of you to go get to get doctorates, right? You don't do that by accident. There are a lot of impediments and hurdles along the way to stop you from wanting to do that. And when people get there, they deserve all of the accolades they get and all of the respect and deference they get because they busted their ass to get where they're at. And then it's, do I want to go on the tenure track? Do I want to take that to business? Right? And is it hugely important to understand that? Yes. But for most things we do in society, government jobs, right? Some of them by default, you can't be a GS-15 if you don't have a bachelor's degree. In most cases, you can't be a GS-12 or 30, depending on what it is. But go in the Beltway, right? Everybody's out there getting a degree from any way they can, not because they were in a quest for knowledge, but because it is a faux requirement to do what you need to do.
So for two of us, the biggest impediment getting a doctorate is this corner right here.
The guy in the top left corner.
That is why it was such an achievement for us to be able to get past that.
It wasn't.
And you were, hey, it's this way for me. So
Yeah.
Because they were both on
Would
my
you
head.
agree? Would you agree that you ended up in a better spot than where you had started?
Oh,
Oh
absolutely.
yeah, I said that's why it was such an achievement. That's why I said.
Yeah.
Right.
I one of the biggest things that came out of it was that I became a much better writer
Oh,
than what I was
absolutely.
before.
Yeah, I mean, take the doctorate away. My writing skills with semicolons was horrible,
Well,
and Jason essentially helped me nail that down, which makes me a better teacher. When my students complain about, my harsh grades and comments, I'm like, well, you know what? Do you want to go to have a job somewhere and not have good writing skills?
My dad used to run a huge piece of the software development for General Electric, and he used to say, I don't care what you do, you're going to minor in English because I got 5,000 software developers and none of them can write a complete sentence about what they're doing.
you're right.
Right? The written and spoken word's never going to go out of style, and a student should never be judged on their grammar solely in an English class.
Agreed. Well, see, and this is the part, and I think this actually ties back to try and wrap this all up for us to where we started with even like mentorship. What I want out of a mentor, I don't need a hand job. I don't need you to tell me where I'm great. I know where I'm good. What I need is you to tell me where I'm wrong
Do you?
and how I'm messing up. What?
Huh?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I got a spare $50. You got to, but,
Can't always
No,
tell
but I mean, like you
you.
think you may know where you're good, but for some people they may not, and they may, some places where they're good, that mentor is going to help them to become great at.
Right.
I completely agree with you, and I think sound advice is to play to your strengths, not to try and overcome learning curves where you're weak necessarily. Depends on what your objectives are. But if right, this is the same kind of question we were toying with earlier about routing traffic. If I have a mentor and their time's valuable, which it ought to be, what do I want them to spend the bulk of their time on? Pointing out where I'm good and already strong, or where I'm going wrong, where otherwise I could be stronger. Not overcoming a weakness, but getting stronger where I'm already strong. It's much more valuable for me where I'm at personally.
I think it's this way. A mentor thing is going to have an idea of where you want to go, right?
Yes.
What's the next? So where's the next thing? And so on some days, telling you to mitigate the bad, right, and work on that is the best thing. But somebody's like, look, you, because I think the other part about what you're good at. I'm not saying this is you, but in general terms, sometimes that you get a self-inflated sense of what you're good at, and you say, I'm gonna lean on this, right? And I'm gonna focus. Well, hey, look, right now, don't worry about something that you're not good at. I used to tell young students and stuff like that when we're thinking like, hey, you're half as good as you think you are, and 10% is cool.
Sure.
Right? Because what I'm telling you is, I always tell people, like, you have two mirrors in life. One is how cool you really are, and the other one's how cool you really think you are.
Mm-hmm.
The closer you get these two together and make it one mirror and you're self-effacing, and you can yell at yourself, right? You can be honest with yourself, the less you're going to get hurt. In the SEAL community, it's physically, right? But whether it's emotionally, intellectually, or anything else, and you're going to stifle your ability to move. So it's not binary. It's not either trying to take away something that you're less than at, or trying to push you farther. It depends on what your goal is in the immediacy and how that's going to help you in the long term.
You're right.
Yeah. Well, Jason, your mentor, would you if you had to choose, would it be Russian or Chinese?
Russian.
See,
Sure.
I would choose, if I had to have a mentor in this case, I would want it to be Chinese so I can learn to better take someone else's ideas and make them even greater.
No, because I'll give you a perfect example. Because we have these 50 chickens coming, we have to expand our farm. I need more land now, right? And so I'm looking across the street, and there's one person, and I don't think that person's particularly of, let's say, upright character. And so I asked the question yesterday to the group, do you think I could get away with going over there and slapping him physically and saying, pack your stuff and get out? This is mine now.
Because I think China does the same thing.
Right? This is kind of a joke, but the world, it wasn't that long ago where the world was in a place where if you wanted something somebody else had, if you were big enough and strong enough, you could just go take it. Yeah. And the world isn't like that anymore. And it was more of a commentary on, I just wonder how we've progressed past that, but we haven't yet gotten to the point where we can't stay 6 feet apart when there's a pandemic.
Tombstone. You're talking about the tombstone culture, I call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Why, Johnny?
Well, see, TK's seen that movie.
You don't know Daisy, right? I mean, but that's it, And hey, you're not doing the right
excuse
thing.
me for not shaking hands.
We're not. Yeah, exactly. We're not here. Apparently, my hypocrisy knows no bounds, right? You're not. You're not. We're not in a position where when people are obviously doing the wrong thing, we don't get aggressive about either making them do the right thing, right? Because here's the thing, some of this, I don't, in early days of my SEAL career, if you weren't happy with somebody, you went outside and took care of it. And then you both came back and you were fine.
Right.
One of you might be more beat up than the other, but you were fine. Right. And slowly but surely, I'm not advocating for that culture, right? I'm just saying that's the way it was. Right. And then it became to the point where you have to have thick skin when you're talking about what you do and why in an after action scenario for a while. And that still exists. The problem is, and we get back to the thing, how many people really want to hear about their faults and are really aggressive about getting better, right?
Right.
The reason, whether it's the Blue Angels, Thunderbirds, SEAL community, high risk communities, that there are after action reports, that are after action meetings, is because when we sit around and everybody strips their rank off, we all have an equal opportunity to have a really bad outcome, aka dying, right? So everybody's a lot more accepting and resilient about taking input, because it's not through trying to find fault with you. It's saying, hey, that was okay, but if you do this, you're putting less stress on the rest of us, and everybody wants to help out because you want to be a tight-knit member of that culture.
Right.
That doesn't exist very many places on the planet, right? Because if you want to go to the worst part of what this could be, the reason that people want to get into feelings, especially politicians and everybody, and manipulate how you feel, is because that's a lot easier to manipulate than people that want to deal in facts, right? And when we start talking about criticism and mentorship and everything, we have to stick to facts, right? And sometimes that fact is like, hey, you are not telling yourself the truth, right? And go why? Or this is this, and you not need to stop focusing on this and focus on this because it's destructive. But there's still a certain amount of the culture that we've gotten away from, where people that behave badly are allowed to continue to behave badly because nobody will walk up and, like you said, slap them and say, pack your shit and get out of here.
Right.
Right. And because why? There's a few people where I just like to walk up and go, okay, it's time for you to stop acting the way you've been for far too long. You have gotten away with what you've gotten away with, but what stops you? They're going to be cowards and go call a lawyer.
Yep.
I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but I'm saying when you get down to the base, the tombstone culture is there's a place and a time for bad people. Now we call it vigilantism because we label everything now, right? And it's part of the culture to try to get rid of concealed weapons, right? Because it's saying that a lot of people say, well, that's a vigilante behavior, right?
So Jason, yeah, I just had to correct you for this part because TK brought it back up again. TK hasn't seen the movie Tombstone. He was there when it was created. That's why he knows the Tombstone culture. I mean, he was right there.
He was in the thick of it.
Well, okay, so for TK and Dan in particular, in doing performance reviews for employees, if you just had to anecdotally guess, for those employees that you've reviewed, where do you think they derive the most value? From where you grade them 1 to 3, or where you've allocated a 4 or a 5? What has the long-term positive outcome?
Go ahead, Dan.
What has a long-term positive outcome?
Yeah, where you point out a 1, 2, or a 3, or where you've pointed out a 4 or a 5?
Well, so I tend to focus on the 4s and the 5s. I don't even really I hate performance evaluations in general because it's a once in a time thing. I mean, I think it's an HR exercise in order to justify the reverse engineering of how much of a salary increase I'm going to give someone. So
agreed.
Right. I had to make that general statement but anyway, I focus only on where people's strengths are. I give them their evaluations so they understand their weaknesses, and I tell them as they are looking to potentially come into leadership, and if they are, then they need to really understand their weaknesses and know enough about their weaknesses to where when they go to hire, they are hiring a well-rounded team, because they need to know, is this person's strength my weakness, because that way I can have a well-rounded team. A lot of them, though, are not going to ever get into a leadership position. So what I want them to know about their weaknesses is that they've got to be able to explain their strengths to whoever's going to be their supervisor later, that their strength is so much more of a benefit than what their weaknesses are. So we have discussions based on both sides of that same coin.
I'm the same way as Dan. The whole thought of an annual review makes my skin crawl.
Yeah.
Right? Because what it says is I'm going to defer. It gives a supervisor, manager. I'm going to say that because I don't think it's a lead. I don't think leaders do this. It gives them a chance to ignore their people throughout whatever periodicity that is. Right. And it's largely an HR thing. It's like tech sales. How much more do we get every salesperson into Salesforce to the point where we become totally metrics driven and are not talking to customers anymore, right? It's
Right,
that type of
right.
behavior.
Sure.
I'm more, hey, how do I highlight folks' positives and in creating a bigger positive outcome? And I do agree with Dan that in good leaders hire people to fill in the gaps, right? Everybody has a blind spot, right? We make automobiles, right? And in those automobiles, now we have blind spot detection. Why? Because no matter how we engineer an automobile, we cannot get rid of the blind spots. When leaders go off the rails, right, and become who they shouldn't be, it's for the most part that through ego, they ignore their blind spots, right? And we all know so-called leaders that hire sycophants, right? And I was told by CEO, like, hey, why didn't you tell everybody that? Right? Because it was in the context of what we were talking about. That was information that everybody could have used to understand the context of decision making to make everybody better. And the response I got was, hey, that thought process is my intellectual property. I'm not giving it away. Okay? I mean,
Right.
like, it's like, what do you say to that? Like, all right, cool. I'm going to go back to work, right? Because I got nothing to say other than something that's going to get me fired.
Right.
Right. And so if you look at the weaklings that become the sycophants long term, right, they're not looking for people to fill in the cracks. They're not looking for somebody to sit in that metaphorical car and look at the blind spot every day of the week. And some people's blind spot is a certain amount of people. Some people's blind spot is, I don't want to hear anything negative. Some people's blind spot is, I don't want to be challenged, right? What good leaders are doing is they're giving performance reviews to challenge people to be better. And that's that mentorship thing you talked about earlier. Do I want to focus on the negatives or do I want to focus on the positives? Hopefully like Dan says, what I brought you in to help round us out as an executive team, and it's not rounding me out. It's me having that conversation with myself, like we've talked about in the past, having that conversation with myself and being adult enough and mature enough to say, I don't know these three things. And I'm going to hurt the company if I continue to stand on the fact I'm in charge and whatever I say about it has to go. And it comes back to be the last one to speak, right? Because when I walk into a room as the leader, how many times do you guys walk into meetings where you don't know the subject of the meeting?
Right.
Professionally, everybody.
Unfortunately, too many.
What?
Unfortunately, too many, and I despise them.
Right, but in very rare cases, do you not have any clue about what's going to be talked about? Everybody before that meeting is already starting to formulate their opinion about what the solution should be for one reason. They want to seem prepared, right? Even if it's a bad idea, I want to hear the idea, right? If I walk in as a leader and I say, hey, we're here today to do this, and this is what I think. What do you guys think? I've already prejudiced everybody to my way of thinking. And like, oh man, and especially if I'm an aggressive leader on wanting my way, right? That's when performance reviews don't mean as much. But like Dan said, I think Dan and I both think the same way, that I'm trying to give away as much as I can. And in doing so, I want you to pick up certain things because I want to elevate everybody's game by giving you all the information I can give you to be successful and then helping you with that. That's my job, right, as a leader. And performance evaluation
also a dangerous piece that I've noticed in some types of leaders as well. They include too many people in the process, and then everything gets boggled down. I mean, as a leader, you also have to remember that you need a small circle to get your informed opinions that you trust that are going to give it to you.
Right.
And then as you expand that circle out, it's not so much I want your opinion anymore, because now we've made the decision with those people. Now we got to execute.
Okay, so if you could say, I've got myself as a CEO, and then I've got the whole executive team. The next thing you start doing is inviting people that work for people in that executive team to come into these meetings, because a lot of times they are a subject matter expert and you need their opinion, right? That is, again, I give context of decision making to that executive team, for example. I want those people in the executive team to learn from my having given them that, and I want them to turn around and give it too. And part of that is knowing when to talk and when not to talk. Now, I'll give you an example. When I was a young SEAL, I'm talking 23, 24 years old. We had a meeting, and I was in there, and I was just being the class clown, and I was running my mouth every step of the meeting. We get done the meeting. My chief looks at me and goes, "Hey, TK, can we go out and check out?" I was the engineering rep. He's like, "Let me go check your box." I was so proud. It was like OCD heaven gone to Madden in the box. All my engines were hanging out. All the boats, everything was perfect, right? As I lean over to unlock this like shipping container that all this stuff was in, I'm undoing the lock. I get hit in the back of the head and drop down. And while I'm getting the living snot kicked out of me, nothing's being said. And I can't get up off the ground. I literally am fighting to just not get kicked in the face. He stops. He looks at me and he says, "Get up." And I'm getting ready to go to fighting stations now that I got a chance. And he puts his hand up in front of my face and said, "You got any more questions about running your mouth in briefs?"
Yeah,
right? Because I wasn't part of the executive team. I was invited into the meeting because I was a subject matter expert on something, and I didn't know where my place was, and I didn't know why. Right? That happens every day in meetings. Dan, there was more than once I leaned over and we were in South Circle. "Hey, not today." Right? Which
Sure.
is what I mean, right? Because there's times where shit can be really funny, right? Just not right then. And it's, but again, that's what I call, it's like the waterfall leadership. I invest time and energy in that executive team. And by extension, I expect everybody to do that so that the great ideas are being percolated up and everybody has context to make and do things that are greater than the talent they think they have.
Amen. Well said.
And then I remember you hit me at a certain times, you telling me that it was enough of me basically when someone said something stupid of just.
Right, because you were the only one that knew it was stupid, right? That was always my thing. It's like, yeah, nobody else gets that that's dumb. Thanks for pointing it out, Dan. Loudly.
I'm like, that is a stupid idea.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, just getting a contain on getting everybody to understand that an executive meeting shouldn't take 3 hours, right? It should be an hour, because we're just getting together, and it's the stuff that we haven't heard on a daily basis when you're funneling it up to me or the CEO at the time. Right? I didn't need everything, or it's to put out word because we always did it on a Monday. It's like, this is important this week, or this is what transpired over the weekend. I didn't have time to tell you, whatever, and then get it out, right? But when you start approaching 10% of your work week for one meeting, like, what are you doing?
Right.
Well, if Alan Mulally every other week could have his entire senior management team's worldwide meeting every other week be 2 hours, I'm sure, a very large 50 person company can get it done in less than an hour.
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
because he created a culture of communication. Yeah. He created a culture that says, I don't have to be perfect. When he showed up, they were losing $1 billion a day or something like that, some nonsense. And every line on every Gantt chart was green. He's like, how's this possible? Well, it was possible because there was a culture of non-acceptance of anything but the appearance of perfection. As the story goes, when somebody finally put up a yellow line on a Gantt chart, he basically promoted that person. Right? Didn't fire anybody else. He just said, hey, I'm going to start paying for people to be honest about what we're doing. And they're not being honest to me. They're being intellectually honest to the organization. And that's what saved the company, was being intellectually honest. And the roadblocks to success at a corporate level like that, I think always boil back down to what level of intellectual honesty is the executive team going to mandate for itself, led by the leader of the organization, and in turn accept that level of intellectual honesty from people below them. The key is to teach people how to give that, as junior as they can, how to give that advice in a fashion that keeps them in the middle of the room. A friend of mine the other day, we were talking about this very thing. He says, what you don't want to become is broken glass, right? Because if you're walking into your house, you walk in your office and you step on broken glass, the minute you hear that noise, it elicits certain emotional responses in you, right? do I have to clean it up? Where did it happen? How come somebody didn't clean it up? So you get anger. You're worried nobody's going to get hurt. And there's a whole bunch of emotional reactions to it.
We're the kids, we're the animals. You get them away.
Right. None of them are good. And in business, you don't want to become that person that's broken glass, right? Because ultimately, what happens to broken glass? Somebody sweeps it up and throws it out. Right? And so how we teach people to speak truth to power, right? And do it in a way that is palatable, right? Because I always go back, hey, if I tell you no, or I disagree with you, just because you get mad, does that mean I shouldn't have told you?
Right.
Right. And if you get people if you get leaders, I do that in air quotes because it's not a trait of leader, they get mad when you say they can disagree with you, but to bring up that something isn't correct and they might have a hand in it not being correct, the minute that starts to become a thing between you and that person is the time one of you has to extricate yourself from the other, or you just have to eat it.
Right.
Right. And once you eat it, you're done. Right. You're done emotionally in my mind. Right.
Sure.
You've lost whatever mojo you have. And now you're a slave to that system.
Yep.
Right. And I think that's bad.
I think that's 2 hours and 10 minutes for this podcast.
It is.
We
We had to
did
do a
a
reset.
second
We
show.
got a lot earlier, but we
We
had to have
do a reset because we went on Central Time.
for earbuds.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Hey, you made it. That's what counts.
Hey, thanks for having me. I missed it.
Dude, anytime. Just
Yeah.
on time.
Yeah, you just have to get up an hour early.
Which is when I normally get up, except when we moved to the pandemic. So, that's all right.
I'm going to go pick some chickens out, friends.
Go
All
get-
right, my friends.
I
Have
want
a
to see
great
some
week.
pics.
Stay safe.
What's
I
that?
want to see some pics of your chickens.
I bet you do.
Yeah.
And on that note, everybody have a great week. Before this degrades into something I don't want to be involved in.
Yeah.
See you guys later.
Thanks,
Later.
Ryan.
Bye, everybody. Cheers.